Let me give a big shout out to all of our sponsors that made today's podcast possible. We got John from Extreme Dragons, Travis from Kuhl Dragons, Steven from Sapphire Dragons, Christy from JK Dragons, she's in the chats right now, Colin from Superfly Dragon, Guy, Ryan from Fryzies Reptiles, and Jason from High Desert Reptiles, or High Desert Dragons. Fuck. You know what? My bad, Jason. Jason from High Desert Dragons. You guys, go check him out. Go check everybody's Instagram out. Make sure you're following. And before we start the live, everybody, there's a little triangle in the bottom right corner. Please hit that triangle and send it to as many friends as you can so we can get the live going crazy tonight. It's going to be a very, very big topic, very good topic. I know, Christy, I know. I'm working. I'm trying to get it together. So where it? Dang. I'm trying. I don't know why I can't. I'm just kidding, guys. It was all a hoax. Tammy's not really coming on. Oh, there she is. All right.
Hi. It took me. I told you it took me a while to figure it out.
All right. All right. The one and only.
And I have to tell everybody I'm sporting my new blue hairdo. So
oh, snap.
And it wasn't supposed to be blue, by the way.
Oh.
That's always fun.
What color was this supposed to be?
Well, it was platinum blonde, and I wanted it quite silver, and it was very expensive, and it's extremely sapphire blue.
All right, you can rock it.
I said, oh, no.
That is awesome, Tammy.
You can match all your blue bar babies now.
You know, I was thinking that. That's true.
All right, so I invited Cookies Critters, but we can kind of get started before he gets on. So Tammy, I want to ask a question first. Is this your first live that you've done?
Well, I've spoken at a couple of conventions long ago, back when they used to do these.
Just on Instagram. Just on Instagram.
On Instagram? Oh, yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
I'm gonna have that as a little trophy somewhere in the red zone, guys. Tammy's first live on Instagram with us. All right. I don't know where he's at, but hopefully he joins before the end of the podcast. But so we will kind of go in order, Tammy, if you don't mind. I was gonna start with like the more, I don't want to say common, but like the easier topics like metabolic bone disease. We'll talk on mouth rot a little bit, some parasites. I know we're going to talk about yellow fungus, respiratory, and then I can't even say it. What was the adenovirus, right? All right. So does that sound good with everybody?
Sounds good.
We're gonna, if anybody has questions about any of these, please just say all your questions in the comments, and Josh is gonna try to keep track of all the comments while we flood Tammy full of questions.
Okay.
So, what would you say is the most common reason you see people giving or their bearded dragon getting metabolic bone disease?
So my phone rings probably once a day. Once a day. Someone with metabolic bone disease. There are two main reasons why you're going to see metabolic bone disease, and I'll explain what it is in a minute. But what I rarely see lack of feeding, poor husbandry. That is cited in old veterinary journals as the cause of metabolic bone disease. I don't see that anymore. I don't even know that I've seen it in many years, but this is what I see. People will take these dragons and they will feed the heck out of them. All of a sudden, they've got this 4-month-old dragon that's growing this big, right? They're overfeeding them. The skeleton is growing like crazy. They are not giving they're still giving a very small amount of calcium, or they're just dusting every other day, or maybe they're dusting with calcium in the morning. It's maybe not enough, whatever. They're not pulling blood levels either, so I don't have a whole picture, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that this fast-growing animal is now pulling calcium. Okay, the body looks for the calcium. It pulls it from the bone marrow, right? That's what happens. That's where this little animal is going to find his calcium. So then when that happens, you get soft jaw, you get all these bad problems, and I'll explain metabolic bone disease in a minute, but that's what I see mainly, overfeeding. So trying to get people to back off the feed is very hard, because they feel, oh, he's not gonna get big. I'm not gonna be able to breed him. I'm not gonna be able to, and I have to back the people up and say, why are you speaking to me on the phone about you're not going to be able to breed this animal when you don't even know what this is that you're calling me about? You know, an animal that's showing seizure-like symptoms and vibrating and all these other little symptoms that metabolic bone disease presents. So that's what, I don't know if other breeders are getting these phone calls that are similar to this. I can only assume absolutely. But that is how we're seeing metabolic bone disease happen in modern times. Okay, so, and what it is simply that. It's lack of calcium. The body looks for calcium. It can't find it. It pulls it out of the marrow, and what happens? You get soft bones. The first place you're going to see the metabolic bone disease when it's out of the stages of the vibrating, the seizures, is in the bottom jaw. Okay, the bottom jaw goes soft. It'll present in a healthy animal as an underbite. So you're going to see a lot of people say, oh no, my dragon has an underbite, I can't breed it. Could be genetic. If it's not genetic, which means the moms, the dads, the grandmas, the grandpas, an established breeder is going to know the history of the line. If it's not that, it's not genetic, your underbite was more than likely caused by not having enough calcium. It's metabolic bone disease that you caught before you got nodules on the wrist, the joints, you know, before it developed into a horrifying situation. Like, I'm sure that we've all seen that, you know, videos and pictures. I see a lot of dragons, pictures with little underbites, and you know immediately, no, these are 18, 19, 20-inch dragons that you're seeing on the videos and in people's pictures, and they're glorious looking creatures, but they've got a little underbite. And you can see that at one time that was probably a very fast-growing animal.
Yeah.
You know, and then they caught up with it, and they're, you know, maybe the dragon slowed down at 16, 18 weeks of age, right? Which is when your biggest growth spurt should kind of be over. And the body kind of caught up with it, and then they didn't have any more episodes with metabolic bone disease. Some people don't even know they have it, that their dragons have it, until the dragon is 7 months old, 8 months old, and they see this, you know. And I'm just citing the common things that I see.
Yeah, so no, I totally agree. I think most people nowadays, there's enough information about lighting and at least dusting with calcium that most people's husbandry issues for metabolic bone disease, like if you see it and it's pretty bad, usually it's just because laziness. Like they literally didn't have a light on it for months at a time or something like that. So I personally didn't put it together that it was like a high protein diet, not enough calcium, and you're forcing the dragon to grow really fast. Like you're forcing it to grow. So that totally makes sense. Like as a baby, as a child of anything, like my son can't be on a high protein diet. He can't grow faster than his bone structure. His muscle structure can't grow faster. So it totally makes sense that that would be with dragons too.
Yeah. So
right.
What about you, Ian? What kind of metabolic bone disease do you guys have in I know you have the same disease, but what problems do you guys have in Australia?
Yeah, look, I think the majority of the metabolic bone disease issues that we have in Australia are strictly secondary nutritional MBD, right? So it comes from the dietary side and obviously the husbandry side as well. And I think the biggest issue with reptile keeping, and specifically keeping bearded dragons, is the wrong source of UVB. And there's this, I suppose, a conditioning to use the old T8s and not have the appropriate reflector and stuff like that. So, you know, people, whether it's a financial issue to upgrade their lighting or to check the output of their UVB, like we have solar meters. Like when you keep a volume of reptile, a large volume of reptiles, it behooves you to have a solar meter.
I mean, Ian, I think
You're on, man.
one of us is crackling like shit.
Yeah, is that me or is that... I'm just going to switch this off. Just give me a sec.
I don't want anybody to miss any of this information tonight.
Might have been it, though.
What was that, Josh?
Yeah, that might have been it because I don't hear the crackling anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Good now,
so
Ian.
the basically a quick recount is, you know, primarily it's nutritional based and husbandry based. Obviously, there is an issue with breeders not doing their due diligence with breeding from healthy, strong stock. But when you've got enclosures that are being sold by reptile enclosure builders and they're using old T8s, but not even a reptile product, they're just using a industrial T8, hasn't got a reflector, so the UV output, you know, may only be about 4 inches away from the globe. It's just not adequate enough for a bearded dragon to get the right UV index to metabolize the calcium into D3. Right, so that's one issue. So you've got inadequate lighting, you've got inadequate temperatures and basking zones. Like people blast their dragons with too much heat or not enough heat. They rely on a thermostat, not using a infrared temperature gun. So if the dragon isn't encouraged to be underneath that UV light, there's no point of having it, right? So, you know, I've seen enclosures where you've got your basking light on the one side of the enclosure, and then like as far as the eye can see, all the way on the other side, you've got another little spiral UV fitting, which is doing sweet fuck all. Like your dragon is basking under the heat and it's getting no UV. So having that appropriate overlap and the appropriate UV gradient, we always talk about heat gradient, having a hot zone, basking, warm side, cool side, but there's not enough of a conversation about a UV gradient as well. Bearded dragons won't bask in the sun 24 hours a day. They'll bug out and find some shade during the high peak of the day. So if we aren't giving our dragon a cool side, then we're just radiating them for no reason. So there's a lack of education when it comes to the appropriate UV that we're supposed to supply our dragons. Like my enclosures, I only build enclosures with T5s because I refuse to use T8s. Now, if that prices me out of a particular job, I don't care. I'm not going to sell an enclosure which is not appropriate for a bearded dragon. End of story. Like, so yeah, like.
Yeah, and guys, you can overdo UVB too. So you can overexpose a bearded dragon to UVB. So you want to make sure, you know, your bearded dragon does also have somewhere. Yeah, Ian, hop out and join back in because I can still hear it crackling. So just join back in real quick and we'll get you back in so it's not so crackly.
Is it me though? Because I just put my radio off. So
maybe it's both of you. Both of you just hop out and jump back in.
Cool.
But yeah, guys, you definitely want to make sure that your bearded dragon has somewhere. Oh, damn! Is it me? Damn, that's terrible. I hope it wasn't me the whole time. Anyways, yeah, so you want to make sure that your bearded dragon can escape away from the UVB as well. It's not good to overexpose them. Look like some rookies over here today. All right, let's put it in. Let me see if that works. Get these guys back in. Sorry, Tammy.
That's okay.
Jeremiah, I think it's you, bro.
Yeah, you sound better.
Yeah. But even when I was gone, the feedback, I think, is coming from your mic.
It's you.
Is it good now, though? Because I changed my mic.
Better. It's clear now, yeah.
Okay, so I plugged in an actual mic. All right. So I'm sorry, guys. It was me the whole time. I was blaming Ian, from Cookie's Critters. I do apologize. Metabolic bone disease, though, guys, can take many different forms. It can be in the jaw. If it gets really bad, you can see the spines. Like there's lots
The
of things.
entire skeleton, yeah.
It's very noticeable before you get to that stage. So,
And the nice thing is the symptoms are super forgiving. That's what's great about it, is that this dragon is going to give you an awful lot of warnings. Pay attention. Pay attention. They vibrate. Their little tiny toes twitch. When they really start to lack the calcium is when they start to have these full body seizures. It's scary, but you can overcome it. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal at that point. It's really not. And I don't mean that in a sense that if your cage setup, of course, that's elementary, isn't it? Your cage setup, and exactly what Ian was just saying. If that is perfect, and you've got your solar meter, and your husbandry, and here's another thing: if you have someone that can give you guidance, a breeder, a friend who's really into, that has been keeping these reptiles for a long time, you need to pick up the phone and send videos. And I take phone calls all day long. I talk to lots of people about metabolic bone disease, and the good thing about it is that it's easy to correct if you catch it quickly. It's not a death sentence.
Yeah, so I'll actually share a little story real quick. I never got MBD with any of my bearded dragons, but when I first got into chameleons, right, I had bought one from Petco, and it probably had beginning signs, and I didn't know. So just the light dusting that I was doing on its insects wasn't enough to combat what it had already gone through, right? So it ended up getting metabolic bone disease and broke all 4 of his little legs, and I had to keep him in a Tupperware container in his cage and hand feed him twice a day with a syringe and give him calcium that was diluted, to his body weight and everything, and went through that for like I'd say at least 2 months, and then he finally started getting better. So with chameleons, it happens a lot more than with bearded dragons. They're a lot hardier. For sure. So you'll see the signs before they break their legs, I promise. But it definitely comes back. Like, he lived at least 3 or 4 more years after that and was strong. He just looked like he was like a little bulldog because his arms were a little bowed out. But unfortunately, I have gone through it. You can come back from it. It's definitely not a death sentence. Some of the other stuff we're going to talk about today is going to be a lot more serious. That is probably the least serious one we do talk about today.
Sammy,
so just before sorry, go ahead.
Do you notice that you see more of the twitching with dragons that are visually translucent?
Nope.
It's just all together.
Skeleton is a skeleton, and calcium is calcium, and I don't think that the morph has really a lot to do with it, or I haven't noticed that, and I've a lot of translucence.
Yeah.
But boy, I mean, we see it in the normal scale, the normal dragons, just as heavily as you do in the translucents.
Yeah, I was just curious because of how, I just feel like they're a little bit more sensitive when it comes to certain things because of their skin. That's just me thinking out of the box.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I don't know that anyone's ever done like a spreadsheet on it. I'm a spreadsheet to fit, to look the numbers, but off the top, I don't think so. I mean, I honestly think a skeleton is a skeleton.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
100%. If you've got a dragon that is calcium deficient, doesn't matter what morph, what color, what age, it's going to show that same symptom that Tammy's been talking about, and that's that body twitching.
Yep.
It's the biggest giveaway to calcium deficiency, hands down. You can't miss it. Like it almost looks like a jag snake with that neurologic issue, or your spider gene. You get that like neuro twitching kind of thing happening. But the problem with this twitching, and the problem with metabolic bone disease is, obviously the simple things like the rubber jaw and the bent forearms and possibly breaking bones, all these things can be rehabbed. But the problem is, once the damage is done, the damage is done. You can improve it and give the animal some kind of quality of life, but it's a lot harder for that animal now to walk. But the obvious thing that you don't see with dragons with MBD is the pelvis and the hips. They're bones as well. So obviously they're becoming loose. So for a dragon to empty its bowel, it doesn't take much for these dragons to prolapse. And that's what I've seen, is dragons that have metabolic bone disease are more susceptible to things like prolapsing, because obviously they're relying more on the muscle tone around the vent to keep things in, because the bone structure and the bone position has now shifted and become out of place, like dysmorphic, I suppose. So there's a lot of other complications that metabolic bone disease actually brings along, not just the weakness to bones. So, yeah.
And what we don't want people to do either, because I'm a mom, so I worry about everything, is now that we're talking about this, for people to run out and now dust their crickets 10 times a day, however many times a day, forever.
Overdoing it doesn't help, guys. Overdoing it does not help. It's actually detrimental.
Back in my day, when I started Bearded Dragons, there was no internet. Al Gore's internet didn't exist. And I didn't have information. You guys have information at your fingertips. I didn't have that. Me and my dad and Bertie and Bob, none of us, Josh, I'm sure we didn't have it. And we did experiments. And I don't mean we killed it. We didn't do that kind of, we did, gave them calcium.
Hydra.
Gave them not enough. And what was happening, if you overdo the calcium on these animals, the arteries in the heart lined with calcium.
Yep.
It's a crazy thing. And the dragon dies, of course. So people are going to, and I've seen it happen. I've heard of it happening. My veterinarian was the one who did the, she always does.
The necropsies.
When we have a dragon that would pass on, we would do a little autopsy on them. I learned a ton of stuff just by taking portions of the body and watching and doing little autopsies. So we discovered that the calcium lines the arteries of the heart when you really pack it to them. So you've got to be careful with that, because that's a whole different, I actually saw a dragon that I knew someone was giving too much calcium. I reached out to him. Water, fluids behind the neck and on the back of the shoulders, and not so much the pads like the geckos get under here that are full of fluid and whatever, but all down the rib cage in a bearded dragon. And I knew right away that was an animal that was in congestive heart failure, more than likely from overdosing of calcium, because when we were overdosing our dragon, we needed to do an experiment. It's very important. Don't get me wrong. It's very important to do some experiments.
Yeah.
You could see some fluid, and that's what we noticed. So you don't want to do that either. That's also a death sentence, to just toss the minerals at them and toss the D3 at them like crazy. You don't want to do that either.
Yeah, because so what a lot of you guys don't know is there's water-soluble vitamins and there's fat-soluble, right? So the bearded dragons can't break down fat-soluble as fast as they can water soluble. Water soluble you can't overdo because they just poop out whatever they don't use. But fat soluble, they can't break it down and poop it out fast enough, so they will make it, you know, they'll store it on their body in different places. And like Tammy was
Yeah, they
saying,
go
you'll
into
see
renal
weird
failure
things
with
and all this
overdoing the
stuff.
calculus.
So overdoing it is never beneficial in anything. You can't
100%,
and usually if you have metabolic bone disease, you got to either reach out to a veterinarian or somebody that can give you a liquid vitamin supplement. It's not something that you can get at Petco or order online. You need to go to a vet. It needs to be weighed, and it needs to have diluted liquid calcium to its weight that'll help it. It's a quick recovery. 30 to 60 days in your bearded dragon should be
blood
much
levels,
better.
people.
Yep.
Pull blood levels. Go to it's cheap. It's $45 to have a panel done. It's very inexpensive, cheaper than your vet visit.
So last
Tammy,
week,
you got a question real quick. What lighting do you use? Like you use 12%, you use T8, you use T5.
So for my juvies and my adults, I have been using mercury vapor for 20 years. And I love it. They have lived on it forever. The dragons live to old age, and they do real well on it. So I have mercury vapor. Now, in the little baby cages, now remember, I don't keep babies that long. They get this big, and they're sold, and they go into their new homes. And so what I have in there is I have the ReptiSun 10.0s in the baby cages.
All right, there you guys go. You got one more question, Tammy. What happens when you overexpose your dragon to UVB? You pretty much kill it. So, exposing it.
Cancer. I mean, yeah. Well, first thing you notice is the eyes. I mean, they keep their eyes closed. That should tell you right away you've got damage, retinal damage on the dragon, and what happens to you?
Yeah,
I mean,
when you stay out in the sun all the time in direct sunlight, it's almost like giving it a sunburn, severely, but you don't see it on its scales. It's internal. So the UVB too strong is fucking up their, messing up their internal organs and stuff like that, guys.
It does. And that was my issue when Arcadia came out years ago. You guys, I don't know if you were born, but when Arcadia came out, I said, okay, and I put them in all my cages. Holy moly. Well, evidently they were too strong. I had retina damage on every one of my dragons. Try working with a bunch of blind dragons. They didn't say blind forever. I mean, they had blisters. And here's my vet at my house. My vet comes to my house. She's treating all these dragons for steroids in their eyes. But that was my issue with the Arcadia lights, and that's why, and I know Travis plugs the Arcadia lights, and I know that now they're different. I mean, I'm going way back. Now they've worked out all the bugs. Of course they have, but that's my issue. I'm kind of mad at Arcadia,
So just quickly on that comment that Tammy just made there about the Arcadia and the Zoomed ReptiSun. So the most important thing is the percentage, right? We all know, but everyone always shoots out this magical number of a 10% UVB, right? Which is awesome if you're a sponsor of the Zoomed, because Zoomed sell that perfect 10%, whereas Arcadias do what they 6, 7s, 12s, and 14s, right? But so the thing is, everyone, but when you look at the packaging of the Arcadia, the Arcadia 14% is a Dragon D3. So you think, I've got a Dragon, it needs D3, so I'm going to get it the 14%. All of a sudden, you're just radiating this Dragon, and like, if you spend too much time in the sun, you're going to get sunburn. A Dragon only needs a UV index of between 3 and 8. That's it. If you give it a UV 14%, you're putting that Dragon, like these Arcadia 14%, they project UV down to about 85 centimeters. If you're running a 2-foot tall enclosure, there's no way that the Dragon can get away into that low range of UVB. You're radiating it, the risk of cancer, the risk, like Tammy was saying, with the ocular damage and stuff like that, it's phenomenal. So the appropriate enclosure and the appropriate height enclosure, sometimes you've just got to do a bit of common sense. And we talked about this last week, common sense, people. If you've only got
you're in a melamine cage that's white,
yep, reflective,
and
yep.
and
just
those
reflecting it like crazy.
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
you can't escape that.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
with the height of enclosures, because you know we've all seen it. Pet shops do the worst job when it comes to advising people on what the appropriate habitat is for these animals, and because they are geared towards sales, right? So they'll sell you a 2 foot or a 3 foot glass enclosure, and it may only be a foot and a half tall. Now, you know, for us Aussies, like, you know, a foot and a half is, you know, 30, 45 centimeters. If you sit a 12%, 14% UV globe in that enclosure, you're going to kill your dragon. Like, there's no two ways about it. That dragon's going to have a short life. It's going to have a poor quality of life. But there's the appropriate use for these globes. If you've got the 14% and it's sitting on top of mesh, no worries. The mesh is going to cut out a third of that UV radiation. So, you know, it's applying the right globes in the right enclosures for the right animals. And so, you know, they have charts. You go to the website, you have a look at the chart. My dragon's enclosure is this tall. The basking spot's up here. Work out the math. Get a ruler out. Do some homework, and, you know, find the right globe to suit your enclosure, because there's not one size fit all solution for all dragons.
Right. And make sure you boop it with your solar meter.
100%.
Yeah, don't cheap out.
Only
I
way.
know solar meters are pretty expensive. They're probably like $200-$300, but I'll tell you
About
guys what,
400
they'll
here.
last for years.
What did you pay for your dragon?
And
Yeah.
yeah, reptiles aren't cheap.
Dragons.
Yeah.
You know, it's the best thing you can do for your bearded dragon besides taking bowls out of your enclosure, unless you're feeding greens inside the bowl. Okay, and we'll talk more about that later.
You should have
how
two
I feel
things.
about
You've
bowls.
got a heat booper and you've got a solar booper. Got two boopers.
Yeah, so the heat guns are super cheap. I'll show you guys.
Yeah, $19 on
20.
Amazon.
Yeah, so you can go to any Home Depot, right, and get one of these. You know, it'll shoot a little laser and show you the temperature. This is what the only thing you should be using to check your basking temps, right? Because this will tell you the surface temperature. A thermometer is going to tell you the ambient temperature, which is the temperature of the air. You don't really care about that unless it's on the cool side of the bearded dragon, where your thermometer should be.
And for your UVI, you stick your dragon where you put him on his basking area and you point it at the top of his head, because you need to know what is the UVI right there at the top of his head, not at his foot.
Yep.
Or not in the middle between that and the top of the cage. You need to know what it is right here. You need to be as accurate as you possibly can.
Yeah, exactly. You're engineering that enclosure for that animal. You need to make sure that you do the calculations. You know that the basking temperature is the appropriate temperature and the UV is the right. If it's too high for radiation with the UV index, if it's too high for the temperature, just lower your basking point. There's no reason that a dragon should be within 1 foot of the UV globe anyway. So,
or like
any
Ian was
place in
saying,
that.
also, some of them have reflectors, right? So
Yep.
you can take away a lot of UVB by taking that reflector off and just having the bulb moved a little bit, because it's without the reflector, it's not shooting so much. And also, some people are just buying cheap ass grow bulbs from like a hydroponic store, and those reflectors are terrible. They're actually killing UVB because that's what they're made for. Plants only need UVA to grow. They don't need UVB. So those reflectors are just terrible for UVB anyway. So make sure you're getting, reptile equipment, not grow equipment, guys.
Yeah. So just quickly, with so we've talked about like the long linear, the T8s, the T5s, but if you're running the little compact screw-in coil type UV globes, those little things, unless they are in a dome, do next to nothing. Like,
Yeah,
seriously,
those are terrible.
your dragon needs to be about 7 centimeters, so about, what, 3 inches away from the actual screw-in coil to get any UVB. Whereas if you have it in a dome, at least the dome is a reflector. It's actually pushing that UV down towards the dragon. But once again, there's not a one-size-fits-all. Every angled dome is different. You've got ones that are really quite shallow, ones that are really quite deep, and they all do a different job. But at the end of the day, if you're using a screw-in coil type and you're using it in a dome, you are only giving that dragon a focal UV spot. And depending, if you've got a large enclosure, that's a whole lot of UV dead zone. Like, you know, seriously, at the end of the day, a T5 these days costs the same amount as a T8, and they are almost as cheap as the coiled screw-in types.
Yeah.
Just buy the good stuff, people. Like Arcadia and Reptizoo, these manufacturers offer a 12-month guarantee that their product will still give the effective UVB output in 12 months' time. Like, there's no point of being stingy about it. Just buy the good stuff, people. Like, you know.
Yeah. Don't cheap out, guys, on your bulbs, on your reptiles, period. So, like he was saying, you know, with the screen top enclosures, some people are also not getting enough UVB because of that. But we're not going to get too much into that. Next, like Jason's saying, yeah, we're going to get into the next disease, guys, which is mouth rot. I don't think it's terribly common with bearded dragons, but it definitely does happen. I've, again, only experienced it with chameleons, and it's because, you know, their cages have a lot of bacteria. You got to keep it moist. So usually it's, you know, more higher humid animals that get mouth rot, but it still happens with bearded dragons, guys.
Yeah, 100%. So with the mouth rot issue, usually I find it's a secondary issue to what's going to be discussed a little bit later, which is your respiratory infections, right? So if your dragon is like really mucousy and having that infection in the upper respiratory area, then it's going to be breeding in the mouth and creating that sort of pussy ulcerations. And you may have dental issues as well as an underlying issue. It could be a bite and attack from another lizard if you're cohabitating, which I hope none of you guys endorse cohabbing. But, you know, here we never endorse cohabbing dragons. But, you know, I've seen them, they get bitten on the head, and whether it's a scar on the top of the head, but the infection penetrates into the upper palate of the mouth of the dragon, and that can cause a mouth rot. But typically, in my experience, a dragon with mouth rot is always a secondary issue, unless it's secondary to poor husbandry. And, you know, like Jeremiah was just saying, if you've got high humidity in a dragon's enclosure and it's living in a sauna, then, you know, it's natural that your dragon's going to have issues with mouth rot and respiratory infections if it's living in that high humidity. It's not a tropical species, so.
I've seen mouth rot happen due to like a bad tooth infection of them, you know, chipping a tooth off or biting or whatever, and that goes unnoticed because nobody really opens their dragon's mouths and counts their teeth until it's, you know, a bubble and there's an abscess on and stuff like that. But a lot of times it's from them chipping a tooth and then getting infected.
Yep.
Right. Or what we had one time was a female that presented with infectious tomatitis. I wasn't really I was more concerned with the lesion that I was seeing on the lip, and then it went to the upper lip.
Yep.
Well, what it actually was when we did a surgery on her mouth, it was a stem from a collard green that had embedded down, and it went down into the bone, right? The mandibular bone went down into the bone, and it caused an infection. Well, when that happens, gram-negative bacteria is everywhere. Salmonella, Pseudomonas, Aeromonas, it's opportunistic, right? So, boom, it goes there, and then it was sidetracking me because now I see this big, huge fat lip. Well, what it was is she had the little infection in her bone. So, correct, it's almost always secondary.
Yeah.
You can also have it's viral. and then that presents as the secondary, you know, because it allows, you know, bacteria, and also the, like you said, the periodontal, you know, issues with dragons too. So yeah, it's really not that common. And pretty much humidity, I mean, I think most people, we don't have a lot of, especially if dragons are kept indoors, you know, our air conditioner takes the humidity out of the room. So
it's these damn bioactive people, okay, Tammy? We tried to tell them bioactive doesn't work with bearded dragons, okay, Tammy? It just doesn't work. But some people, they just don't want to listen, and they try it. You know, they want to change the wheel and show you guys that they can make it, you know, they can make it work somehow, and it doesn't. And, you know, I see a lot of people, the biggest thing is the upper respiratory infection, which we can touch on next, because high humidity for bearded dragons is absolutely terrible. Like, you're going to give your bearded dragon an upper respiratory infection. Most people, when we go to a tropic place, you know, happen to get, like, most of people when they go to a tropic place and they're from an arid place, they get pneumonia, right, which is fluid in the lungs. Same thing with bearded dragons. When you take them from somewhere that they're naturally in an arid place, it's dry, that's what they're used to, and you introduce high humidity in the air.
South Florida.
What was that?
South Florida. Yeah. You know, you keep a lot of people that want to keep their dragons outdoors, and you know what you get? And we'll touch on this later. Yellow fungus, mouth rot, upper respiratory, and I've seen it, you know, and it's by the bundles, you know, keeping them outdoors. And we've had our failures with that. We've had our successes with that too. But boy, there's a fine line with that. But you're right. The high humidity that's tough. And I think on my parakeet, I really like to plug my dragon room. Now all my dragons are indoors, but the dragon room runs at 42 to 44%. Why does it go up and down? Well, look, when I feed a salad, bing, it goes up a little bit when you feed salad because, right, it's moist. Anytime you do anything, it's going to raise your humidity in your tank when you do a water bowl or whatever it is you're doing. So I like to I don't like to go above 44%. And I haven't seen anything, any of these problems when I keep it right there.
Yeah, because
so I got a carbon charcoal filter in my room that runs 24/7, except when we're doing the podcast because it'd be hell annoying. You guys want to be able to hear me. And that keeps it super dry in here, like maybe like 40 probably at the highest and like 32 to 35 at the lowest point. But definitely bearded dragons need that. When like you had said earlier, air conditioners and heaters, those also dry out the air a lot. So if you're running those in your reptile room, and it's super easy to measure this, guys. You guys can get a hygrometer from Home Depot and set them in, you know, 2-3 different corners in your room and measure it, because there's pockets in your rooms, right? Because they're squares, so there's going to be pockets where air catches. You want to put multiple hygrometers, so if you do find a pocket, you can put a
$9 from Amazon. Yeah.
You want airflow in your entire room. You don't want it getting stagnant or staying in little pockets. So that's definitely something you can track super easily to keep the humid air down if you are in a humid place. I don't have that problem. I have the opposite problem.
So what I do here is I have the Arlec Grid Connect, right? So they have Wi-Fi boards, they have Wi-Fi temperature sensors, Wi-Fi humidity sensors. Everything these days, you can get a Wi-Fi attachment and you can get all the data on your phone. It's bloody brilliant, right? So at any given time, you can go, how hot's my reptile room? How humid is it? You can turn your cameras on. You can turn your lights on and off. They are bloody brilliant. But I get that this is a bearded dragon podcast, but just for anyone out there that is potentially keeping other species, whether they are chameleons, geckos, snakes, it's not just high humidity that causes respiratory infections. Super low humidity will also cause a respiratory infection as well. So
the reason I don't keep chameleons anymore.
Yeah. So if you've got a tropical species and you're keeping it in an arid sort of enclosure, then that is potentially going to lead to a respiratory infection as well. So guys, yes, this is bearded dragons, but for all the other species, make sure you have that little window, nice and sweet, nice and honed in, not too high, not too low, because it's any extreme, you know, overfeeding, over supplementation, they all lead to issues, just like under supplementation and underfeeding. You've got to find that little sweet spot.
So someone said, I thought RI was bacterial and had to be spread. So upper respiratory infections can be bacterial, can be viral, fungal, it can be from parasites. So there's multiple things that cause upper respiratory infections, guys, and we're going to touch on all of them. Just right now is, you know, we're talking about humidity, that causing upper respiratory infections, but there's multiple things that cause upper respiratory infections. Tammy, I'll let you know all the scientific words.
Well, with respiratory, it's too broad to even cover on this podcast, I think. You know why? Because that is the most common thing that dragons get. You can, and I don't want to go into the breeding it, but you can be, okay, I'm going to breed this female to this male, put her in with the male. I supervise all covers, right? I don't walk away from a cover. A cover happens, and I remove her right away. That female maybe get stressed out over that 5-minute interaction, and then pop a respiratory and present with respiratory the very next morning. What is that? Why did that happen? Well, right away that began to tell, I'm going to go back years, that began to tell us what's going on with the immune system of this dragon, that they're going to present with respiratory over something as natural or as small as that. So to me, I worry about things like that. I don't have a lot of respiratory infections. I'm very cautious with my husbandry. Is very good, as I'm sure you know. Now that we're, you know, modern times, I like to use that word a lot. Now that we're modern times, we see it so much less, but we still see it, right? We still see it, and it is an immunoresponse. Now, if it's not your dragon drinking, getting water in his lungs, I'm not talking about that kind of thing. But they're all immunoresponses, and it's all stress related, and it's kind of shows you how fragile they really are as far as their stress, what they can handle. So if it's not, now let me get on the drinking thing. You know me and the drinking. I don't like putting dragons in tubs. I don't like it. I don't like putting water bowls in cages. I never have. I water them with eyedroppers. That's my prerogative. I can do what I want to. I've got the time, and I feel safe doing it that way. But there are many dragons, and we just had an issue a week and a half ago with somebody where they were drinking, right? He's watching. The dragon was drinking, and he submerged it past the nostrils. Water got in the lungs. You almost don't come back from that. So that's another time. Then they present with respiratory. Of course, they get pneumonia. And treating that one is a tough one. But I think that they can get respiratory, you're right, bacterial, fungal, viral, and they can present with it.
Yep.
So yeah, like I said, it's broad. It's hard to cover it in just one podcast because it's such a big thing in our community.
I totally understand. So guys, definitely when you start seeing signs like your bearded dragon opening its mouth and trying to breathe, fast but short breaths, stuff like this, you wanna go get it to a vet and get it tested, so that you know, because the vet's gonna be able to tell you what you're fighting against. Okay, so you don't treat all of them the same way. Not all, and like mouth rot. So mouth rot is usually done with like a rinse and some type of keeping the area clean, and like oral, or if it's really bad, maybe an injection of antibiotics. So we touched on how to get rid of MBD. Mouth rot is usually pretty easier. You swab and clean the area, and then it either needs an injection or some oral antibiotics. Upper respiratory is kind of the same thing depending on how bad it is. Obviously, you don't need to do the mouth rinse, but it's antibiotics somehow that you have to get into the bearded dragon to help fight whatever is going on. and you need the right antibiotics, you know, they're not all going to do the same thing in this case. Whew, that was a lot.
And by the way, for mouth rot, I heard the snake people are the snakes, I guess, I don't know anything about snakes, but the snake people have the vets are putting these little beads, right? These little beads that they're implanting into the lesions, and they're like a slow release antibiotic that just kind of fizzles out over time, and I guess they're having incredible success with it. So that's a pretty nice way, other than injecting itraconazole or whatever it is that you're going to be injecting into this dragon, you know, for his mouth rot, depending on, you know, what type it is. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, no, that actually sounds super cool. I have not ever heard of that.
Yep. Yeah.
What about you, Ian? Have you ever dealt with any upper respiratory infections? I know you guys are like prime fucking weather for bearded dragons, but I'm sure something happened out there before.
You know, Sydney's still a coastal area. We still have, you know, stupid humidity. Like, it's been pissing down rain for the last 2-3 weeks here. The next 2 weeks are going to be shit as well. So, you know, we've got massive humidity issues just like anywhere else. So you can have spikes in humidity from, you know, 30% to 60%, 70% in your room. Like, that's in your room. Obviously, an enclosure is different. You've got, like, high temperature lights in there, which are going to evaporate that humidity out. But I think Tammy touched on it before. Like, you know, as long as your husbandry is right, as long as all your techniques are right, respiratory infections are one of those things that should be readily and easily avoided. In terms of bathing, one of my pet peeves is when I see people bathing their dragon in a bathtub or in a hand basin or a kitchen sink. For fuck's sake, sorry guys, but you know, at the end of the day, you know, you're going to put your child in there and give them a bath afterwards, or you're going to wash your hands after going to the bathroom, and you're cross-contaminating. It's gross. You don't want to see a bathtub with a dragon in there. It's not cool, but you know,
I don't do the bathtub. I'm totally guilty of the tubs. I know you guys already said, you know, no tubs, but I'm totally guilty of the tubs.
So I've got large bains which I use, but shallow water, right? And so the reason why it's sort of a twofold approach with me giving a dragon a bath. It's never a frequent thing. It's never routine. I'm very against routine bathing for dragons. It's only for sanitary, so hygiene. If you're going to go handle that animal and that's got a big smudge of turd up its tail, by all means, give the dragon a bath and clean it for your own sake and for your kids' sake. By all means, bathe and rinse it. Don't soak the dragon. There's no necessary reason to soak a dragon just for hygiene. But if the dragon wants to swim, at the end of the day, I've had dragons, and especially I find it more so predominantly with the Henry Lawsoni, the pygmy bearded dragons. Those little guys love to swim. If it is a voluntary action where they put their head underwater and they will swim, then it's like us. You're not being waterboarded. You are putting your head under, you're holding your breath, and there's low to no risk of the water entering their lungs. They know how to breathe and stop breathing. So as long as it's voluntary, you know, so if you're putting your dragon's head under the water to make sure that you get the shed off the top of the head, then, you know, you're just doing some old school interrogation tactics, and you're going to kill that dragon by giving it a flooded lung pneumonia. So, you know, bathing, not necessary. Hygiene and medical reasons are the only two reasons why you should bathe a dragon. Simple as that. Like, people overdo it all the time, and, you know, it's a pet peeve. Like, so.
Well said, Ian. Well said. So our next topic is going to be parasites. I personally only know about pinworms and mites. So I don't know any other parasites.
What about coccidia? Coccidia, flaglets.
Yes.
Protozoas.
Yeah. There's tons.
All right.
There's
all
tons.
right. It's not bad. Redzone Reptiles for not knowing about parasites right now. That's why I brought the experts on, guys. All right.
Yeah.
You have to go to the vet. I get phone calls. 100%. Oh, my dragon has diarrhea. Does he have, you know, pinworms? Does he have? Well, this is one thing, cheap. It's cheap to go to the vet and get that taken care of. You get a stool sample. Look, if it's, someone just said crypto, I think, right?
Crypto.
Well, that's PCR. I mean, you don't detect that in a fecal.
That's blood. Yeah.
But hey, even PCRs are cheap these days. They're $80 to go get a PCR done on a fecal. You can send the fecal in, see what little pathogens are running around in that, and then do a nematode. One for pins. They get tapes. They get hooks. They get all those, and that's easily treatable with, fenbendazole. And the vet will give you a little thing, and you treat them for, a week and follow the directions, and that's super, super safe.
And someone said we all have parasites. So just so you guys know, every bearded dragon probably has pinwheels in its gut somewhere, right?
Maybe.
It's not that it's there, it's how much is there.
It's
taking over because the bearded dragon has a gut infection, or it's just not taken care of. Poor diet, like we talked about last week. This stuff.
Low temps.
So make sure you guys are feeding those mealworms. Okay.
Yeah. So
probiotics.
Just very, very quickly on the pinworms, bearded dragons, like all living creatures, have a acceptable threshold of intestinal parasites, and the primary role of that parasite is to assist. It's not that good bacteria, like it's going to assist with the digestion of the dragon's food. So people that routinely ivermectin their lizards to get rid of worms, guys, stop it. Like, you're killing the good bacteria in that lizard.
Kill the dragon.
Yeah.
It's on my care sheet in a paragraph this big.
Yeah. So
it's stressed
at the end of the day, you will not know what kind of parasite your dragon has without a veterinarian doing a stool sample culture. So, if you have to get a fresh stool sample, don't freeze it. If you have to keep it till the afternoon, till the next morning, put it in a little stool sample container, ziplock it, double ziplock it, put it in your fridge. It's going to gross your other half out and gross your kids out. But
keep it in the baggie.
Do not freeze a stool sample, because you're going to kill off the parasites, and then that stool sample is now useless. If you can't get a stool sample done, then wait till you get to the veterinarian. The veterinarian is just going to give the dragon an enema. You'll get a stool sample real quick at the veterinarian, so that's fine. Go there. They are super cheap here in Oz. It's like $35 to get a stool sample cultured, so you know what you're dealing with. You're going to know if it's coccidia. You're going to know if it's a normal acceptable threshold, or if it's just stupidly crazy and you need to start giving that animal antibiotics to kill off that infection, essentially. So don't treat it at home unless you've had the medical advice to treat the animal first. Don't just be Dr. Google. Go to a proper doctor.
Right. And enough of this breeder's dirty. The breeder the breeder I got is just filthy because he's loaded in pinworms. Enough.
Yep.
I don't tolerate those kind of phone calls, because that's talk that's not, it's illogical.
It's not productive.
Right? And I get it every other day. Pinworms parasites have no bearing on, it's a filthy no, they get pinworms. It just happens. They carry it in their digestive system. It's just a matter of, is he infectious right now? Is he showing signs of parasitic infection? And the vet will find that out for you. But that kind of
stress out.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just backing up.
Yeah, so just with that one there, so all living organisms have parasites. So, we talked about it last week when we were talking about, dietary needs, the right amount of food, all that kind of stuff. Husbandry for your dragon is key. Husbandry for your feeder insects is key. If your feeder insects are living in filth, if there is dead, decaying bugs living in the bottom of your tote, and you're not cleaning that shit out, then you are literally feeding your dragons an atomic bomb full of things like flagellates and coccidia. Like, it comes from multiple sources. One of those sources is from the food that the animals eat. If you're buying your salads from the supermarket and you're not rinsing off the salads, then there's parasites on that salad. Obviously, there's possibly other kind of sprays and nastiness on there anyway. But rinse off your greens, guys. Keep your bugs clean. Keep your soil clean. Things like flagellates is a soil-borne parasite.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got dirty, feces-laden, and you've got things like all the frass from all the bugs that have been like jumping around in the enclosure, if your substrate is filthy, then your dragon is going to be filthy. It's got nothing to do, very rarely does it have anything to do with the breeder that you bought the animal off. It is husbandry. Husbandry is the biggest key. Like, yes,
right,
you can buy a baby dragon. I'm not going to deny this. You can buy a baby dragon that has high levels of coccidia, pinworms, flagellates, protozoa, everything like that. It is going to have high levels if the previous breeder has kept them with poor husbandry. But it comes down to poor husbandry. And we will talk about this when it comes to quarantine, because people blaming a breeder for infecting the rest of their collection pisses me off. Like, it's one of those things, like, it's not productive. Quarantine your animals.
Yes, quarantine. We're going to talk about that when it comes to the quarantine section. That is key. If everyone is, well, I'm not even going to get into it. I'm not. We'll get to that. Next, let's yellow fungus. So this is something I've actually never dealt with, but I probably get like 5 messages a month with someone with like some stuck shed on their bearded dragon. Like, is this yellow fungus? And I'm like, no, your bearded dragon's about to shed. Like, don't worry. So I personally have never actually dealt with yellow fungus, and I've never seen it firsthand. So this is something that I'm definitely going to need, your guys' help with. Tim, you want to touch it first?
Manasiopsis garai is the.
Just so you guys know, we're still talking about yellow fungus. And she just
that's yellow. It's yellow. Right? It's what's responsible for the yellow fungus? This, I don't actually know how they get it, but I do know this. I'm not talking about South Florida because that's where I'm from. Why is it the animals that are living in the outdoor cages develop yellow fungus? And the ones that are inside in the dragon room, they don't get it. So in Miami, I got a telephone call from a boy. I had 15 dragons in outdoor cages in Miami, and every one of them had yellow fungus. Now, that day it was raining. It was raining. And I went down and I looked at these animals, and they were just loaded in yellow fungus. Big, healthy, they were gorgeous, beautiful animals. And so, well, I keep them out here all the time. It's summer and they love it, and they don't know what's going on. So, high humidity, being outdoors, the yellow fungus is in the wood, in the cages, it's in the soil, and this has to be where they're picking this up. So, now you have yellow fungus. What do you do? Well, at the stage that his dragons had yellow fungus, they were all euthanized because he couldn't itraconazole for months and months and months, which also would kill the dragon because it eats the liver away, that antifungal. Once it reaches a certain stage and you have these lesions all over the body, it's also systemic, right? Because it starts on the inside. So it's also on the organs. It's eating the dragon up from the inside out. And those are my vets for, quote unquote. This is something I am pretty frightened of. I mean, to tell you the truth, I've not had a case of yellow fungus. We have had many cases in Miami, South Florida, people having dragons outside that are not bringing them in. Right? Because in our outdoor cages, I brought my dragons in at night. They were outside the sun and then they came back in. And that's all over my tear sheet too. So I don't have a whole lot of experience with the yellow fungus. I know what it is. I know what to look out for. I've had people send me videos of dragons with yellow fungus. But here's the deal. You get the dragon to the vet. You're going to try. I don't know if it's a death sentence all the time. That sounds illogical that it would be a death sentence if you catch it early, right? Because I think that you could manage it. But here's the thing that I do know. Even if you're managing it, they still have relapses, and the dragons have periods throughout the year where they'll have a lesion on the hand or a lesion on the head, or they'll pop these lesions even after they've been treated with the iconozoles, and I don't know what type of drugs they're using now, but it was like itraconazole years ago is what we were using for dragons that had yellow fungus. So unfortunately, my experience is a little bit limited. I know enough to know to look out for it.
So, and what I saw in the research that I have done is usually when you see it on the outside or on the skin already, it's already infected the inside.
Right.
So it starts internally and moves its way outside. And if
Keep
you're
your
seeing it
humidity
visibly outside, it's usually pretty prominent inside the bearded dragon too.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been very fortunate. I haven't had to have any dealings, any exposure to yellow fungus. But so the fungus itself feeds on keratin, right? So the keratin is what actually create the scales and everything like that for a bearded dragon. So hence the reason why it is a scale condition. Now, Tammy touched on it earlier with the high humidity. There's high humidity, there's stress, there's being surrounded by infectious animals, poor quarantining people. Like, we're going to talk about it, but poor quarantining. If you've got animals that you've brought into your collection,
highly infectious,
and they've got yellow fungus, well, shit news, people, but now the rest of your animals are now susceptible to having yellow fungus. So the big key takeaway, I think, with this is you've got to be really careful that you don't just focus on the word yellow, because it does not just present as a yellow lesion. They will present as dark brown, black
red
lesions. Yep, 100%.
Burgundy red.
Yep,
these dragons had burgundy red, yellow, all different.
I can't remember what disease or what illness we're talking about, but Tammy nailed it on the head. Keep an eye on your dragons, people. Get to know them and learn what is normal and what is not normal. So a shedding, like Jeremiah, it's obvious when a dragon's shedding, but
even shedding around the eyes.
Yep, but it's not necessarily normal for a new keeper. If they've bought a baby dragon, they'll experience shedding frequently, very routinely. But an adult dragon, if they're rescuing a year-old, 2-year-old dragon, and this thing's only going to shed once or twice a year, they're going to get a bit of a curveball in 6 months' time when that dragon goes to shed, and they're going to be like, shit, what's this? Right? So they're going to reach out to one of us and say, is this scale rot? Is this yellow fungus? Is this normal? I did a video on YouTube about tail rot, and I tell you what, every second question I get through YouTube or Instagram is a photo of a dragon. Is this tail rot? Now, there's times that you need to be panicking and concerned, but when you start getting obvious lesions, the key is catching it early, and then you can manage it. From what I understand of the actual condition, there's not a silver bullet that kills the fungus completely. You can manage it, you can get some quality of life, but it's that decision that you're going to pump this animal full of antibiotics for the rest of its life to keep that fungus at bay. Yep. And so
I believe if it's systemic, that it's never going to go away.
No, never.
Anything systemic you can combat, right?
Go
to make
remission,
it less,
and it comes
but
back.
you can never, it'll never go away.
But the issue with that is, and this is where it comes down to a decision as a keeper. You can constantly throw antibiotics at an animal, but if it's never going to come good, you have to have that line in the sand drawn. When is the animal's needs more important than my needs as a keeper to do what is humane and right? Because you pump an animal with enough antibiotics, it's not going to have a functioning liver or functioning kidneys. the animal's got no quality, and then you're just being selfish. And you need to have that conversation with your vet people. If you've got an animal with yellow fungus, figure out a strategy and a limit. When is enough?
Yep. Please get a good reptile vet, people.
100%. Ask for
I was
references
so
in your
blessed,
area.
but many people aren't. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys, and then